Noel Plumb has tackled this video quite ably, and I agree with all of Noel's points. This is a response from the perspective of someone directly affected by Steve Shives' toxic thinking, being here in the U.S. with Steve Shives.
Do all ideas deserve a fair hearing? Sure. But what about ideas who have had their fair hearing and have been widely discredited and rejected?
Steve, from many points of view, for example, the outcome of the November 2016 election, it looks like your ideas have had a fair hearing and were rejected by the American people. Does this mean we should dismiss you?
With the recent punching of white supremacist Richard Spencer and protesters shutting down scheduled appearances by racist, misogynist, professional internet troll Milo Yiannopoulos, I've heard many people arguing that the likes of Spencer and Yiannopoulos should be allowed to have their say, that their voices ought to be heard, so that if their claims are false or their rhetoric is harmful, we can respond in kind, with the truth, or with better ideas.
Yes, Steve. That is sound advice. What better disinfectant than sunshine, as they say? Who could possibly argue against free speech? Will you, Steve?
The people making these arguments are, for the most part, good, well-intentioned people. Many of them are just as disgusted by Yiannopoulos and Spencer as I am. They're motivated by their dedication to free and open discourse, to the principle that no idea should be suppressed. And in principle, that's a fine notion.
No, Steve. It's flat out a fine notion. I must admit that I never heard of Milo and these other nefarious characters until they received so much publicity with attempts to keep them from spewing their ideas. The PC police have created this monster. Those who decide what is wrong think and issue decrees that those who you disagree with are not afforded the same rights as you.
Particularly when we're talking about the role the government plays in regulating speech. Do we want the state stepping in and saying that there are certain things we just can't say, no matter how vile those things might be? No, I don't think most of us would want that. But does that mean that every propagator of every theory and ideology is entitled to a platform and an audience?
2 points here, Steve. Do we want the state to regulate free speech? You say no, then add the word but. In all honesty, I think you would like it if the government regulated speech you deemed incorrect. You do know that free speech is not protecting ideas you agree with, Steve. It is protecting ideas you find offensive. Otherwise, it wouldn't be freedom. It would be what Steve and his ilk decides.
No, of course not. And since when has that ever been the case? We ignore people promoting what we have come to regard as bad ideas all the time. It happens in science, it happens in politics, it happens in our everyday lives. There comes a point where the argument is over, where continued discourse on the matter would be of no use to anyone other than the most stubborn, die-hard supporters of a roundly rejected position.
Well then, Steve, let's look at it this way. In the marketplace of ideas, there will be winners and losers. Round earthers have won the day, and most of us agree that people walked on the moon. Where your argument could rightly come into play is not when there is a clash of ideas or opinions. And do you, Steve, decide as sole arbiter of truth which ideas are worthy of debate? But where actual news is being reported. I think we both agree that there shouldn't be a false equivalence when it comes to reporting news. When reporting on gravity, should we give equal time on the 11 o'clock news to those who oppose the theory of gravitation? If we are reporting on the Nazi Holocaust, should we give equal time to Holocaust deniers? No. Steve, no. But when it comes to opinion, no matter how odious, who gets to decide who has a say and who should be shut out? Noel Plumb has expertly pointed out that these ideas that you want to ban are coming from speakers who were invited on campus by students. I'll paraphrase Richard Dawkins and say that if we can't have a free exchange of ideas on university campus, then where would we, Steve?
The thing is, it's not just better ideas that defeat bad ideas. My friend Eli Bosnick made this point on Twitter a few days ago.
I guess your friend Eli is one of the people not blocked by you on Twitter. This talk of ideas is rich, coming from a man who is widely known for the concept of banned by Steve.
I'm saying he's my friend, but we don't really know each other that well. I like him, I think he likes me, so I'm saying he's my friend. And if Eli has a problem with that, he can come find me and I'll take care of his problem for him. How about that? Actually, no, forget that last bit. Eli and I have only met in person once, and we're about the same size, and I can't fight, like, at all. So if he can handle himself even a little bit, that might go really badly.
Steve apparently isn't new to talking violence. I have always thought that people with the courage of their conviction wanting to be violent towards their fellow man would want to face their opponent and, just like the marketplace of ideas, duke it out fair and square. If you're supporting a pussy that sucker punches and then runs, then that makes you a supporter of a coward. Here is a clip of Steve Shives condoning this sort of violence. The person who is the recipient of this violence is someone I share contempt for. Here is a clip of Steve condoning violence against someone he disagrees with. The victim gets no sympathy from me, but just after Steve's statement on condoning violence, there's clips showing how other groups use this same tactic, and the resemblance is pretty creepy.
People, and including a very disappointing number of so-called skeptics, who are trying to make it like, well, you can't just go around punching people because you disagree with them. And that is not remotely the issue. It's not a matter of disagreement. It's not, well, I think I'm more of a Plato guy and I'm more of an Aristotle guy. It's, I think white people are genetically superior and I'm totally okay with subjugating or maybe even wiping out people of color. Like, that's the kind of, those are the ideologies that Richard Spencer pushes. Those are the kinds of things that he publishes in his newsletters and on his websites. That's who he is. He's a white supremacist. He's a white nationalist. He's a neo-Nazi. He promotes an incredibly harmful, dangerous ideology. That's who that guy is. And look, as a general rule, punching people on the street is bad. I am anti-punching people as a rule. And yeah, as Chris pointed out, it's illegal and it should be. And if you punch somebody on the street and you get caught, you should be charged with a crime. That's the way it goes. But am I going to shed a single tear over Richard Spencer being punched? Absolutely not. Am I going to waste an ounce of breath wringing my hands or expressing any sort of annoyance or concern over Richard Spencer being punched? Absolutely not. The truth is, if somebody had run him over with a lawnmower, I wouldn't have cared, because he's a piece of shit. And while I do not recommend violence against people, if shitty things happen to shitty people, you know what I usually say? Well, good, fuck him.
I drove by my front door and I saw this little orange piece of paper sticking out of it. And I knew immediately what it was. I knew that it was some kind of flyer alerting my neighbors to who I was, what I did for a living, and where I lived. They started picketing regularly on a monthly basis in 2006. They were very derogatory, calling me a baby killer. They hold signs that say Jennifer hires the baby killers.
No, but I mean, do you think you're actually doing anything? Are you like having any kind of impact at all?
The protester that comes to my house publishes a newsletter called the Prisoners of Christ newsletter. And it is published on the Army of God. And he sends this newsletter to prisoners who have been imprisoned for murdering doctors, bombing clinics, kidnapping providers. So he's communicating with them, and he has our names and addresses so that when these prisoners are released, they can perform an act of violence.
Some in the pro-life movement, and these are the extremists, do not openly make threats against abortion providers, but use the same language. If something were to happen to one of those doctors, then it's God's will. We can only hope that the army of Steve isn't as violent as these extremists.
My casual acquaintance Eli Bosnick made this point on Twitter a few days ago. Refuting bad ideas with good ideas is important, but so is removing bad ideas from the discourse. And when we refuse to do that, When we continue to engage with people pushing arguments that have already been refuted, we treat their bad ideas as though they were legitimate.
I would argue that by your logic, we would be legitimizing those bad ideas by saying we do not have an argument that is good enough to refute them, that we need to silence them instead. You probably remember poor old Giordano Bruno, or maybe you don't.
There's a name for this, the balance fallacy. It's what happens when people see their ideas treated as though they have merit or might have merit when we already know that they don't have merit. The balance fallacy is the only hope the likes of Spencer and Yiannopoulos have for continuing to earn a living disseminating their long ago discredited ideas.
We're back to the false equivalency again, Steve. No matter how much you try to silence dissenting opinions, those thoughts and bad ideas will see the light of day. They will not be scrutinized by healthy individuals, but will fester in dark corners and possibly grow and thrive unchallenged as they have in the past. I agree that we should not give equal time when it is news or what we consider facts, but that is not what we're talking about. If Fox News gave Richard Spencer equal time to report his truth, then you have a hope of an argument. But in the sphere of opinion, often what Fox and other corporate-owned media are so good at, everyone has a right to express their views unless they incite violence and all the other common sense things we agree on.
That's why they lean so hard on their warped, self-serving caricature of free speech, which in their interpretation includes not only the right to speak, but also the right to a microphone and an audience. But that's not how it works.
That is how it works, Steve. In this brave new world you're hoping for, it's a very dangerous path you, Steve Shives, are leading us down.
Refuting bad ideas with good ideas is necessary, but that's just step one. Step two is leaving behind the bad ideas and the people who continue to cling to them and demand our attention. Do they have the right to continue to speak in support of their bad ideas? Sure they do. Do they have the right to a platform to better enable them to disseminate those ideas? Absolutely not.
So says the minister of wrongthink.
Let them speak, but let it be from atop an apple crate on a street corner.
Do people still do this? Apple crates?
Not on a stage at a university or in front of a radio microphone or a television camera.
This is exactly where we want the bad ideas, where we can examine them and come to our own conclusions.
We've heard what they have to say. Now it's time to stop indulging them so the rest of us can move forward.
And we've heard what you have to say, Steve. Many people are pretty shaken up about who got elected to the office of the president. There are many voices who are blaming the PC police and social justice warriors for so disgusting the American population that we elected Donald Trump. Keep doubling down on your bad ideas, and I fear you and I both, Steve, will be enduring 8 years of the Trump. If you believe that 4 years of nominating Supreme Court justices and cabinet officials isn't enough, then after you and your ilk double down, they may just get double the amount of time to do so. Steve talks about there are those out there that are well-intentioned, good-intentioned, and I believe that there are those in the social justice warrior community that are also well-intentioned. I'm not too sure all of them are, hashtag, not all SJWs, but there may be places that we can agree. There are a lot of places we disagree, and it's never bad to start a dialogue in discussing these issues. Thank you, everybody, for watching this video. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you like the channel, please subscribe. Visit us on social media. Thank you very much, and goodbye.